Susan Miller stood at the command center window of Earth Defense Station Alpha, her hands gripped tightly behind her back. On the large screen in front of her, red dots blinked out one by one as human ships were destroyed. The blue dot representing New Mars colony had disappeared an hour ago. 12,000 people gone in minutes. "Commander Miller, we need to retreat," said Lieutenant Frank Davis, his voice shaking slightly. "We've lost 30% of our fleet. The Zalaxian shields are too strong." Susan closed her eyes for a moment. 6 months ago, humans had made first contact with the Zalaxians. At first, things seemed hopeful. The aliens were advanced with technology centuries beyond Earth's. Then, without warning or clear reason, they attacked. "Order all ships to fall." "Back to Earth," Susan said. "We need to regroup." As the remaining human ships jumped to light speed, Susan made her way to the war room where Admiral George Wilson waited. His normally confident face looked tired and old. "We can't beat them with what we have," the Admiral said simply. "Their ships are faster. Their weapons cut through our best armor like paper. And those shields..." He shook his head. "Nothing. We throw at them even makes a dent." "Sir, we need to try something different," Susan said. "We have some of their technology from the crashed scout ship on Titan. My team has been studying it for weeks." Admiral Wilson nodded. "You have 72 hours, Commander. Bring me something, anything that might give us a chance." In the research lab deep within the station, Susan found her team of scientists working frantically. Dr. Olivia Green was analyzing alien metal samples. Professor Henry King was studying Zalaxian power systems. And then there was Jack Peterson, sitting in the corner with headphones on, bobbing his head to some beat while poking at what appeared to be an alien body part. "Peterson," Susan called. "What are you doing?" Jack jumped, pulling off his headphones. His wild brown hair stood up, in all directions, and his lab coat had what looked like taco sauce on the sleeve. "Commander, perfect timing. I think I found something weird," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "So I was looking at this piece of what we think is their ear, right? And I noticed that when I play certain sounds near it, the nerve endings go crazy." Susan walked closer, interested despite herself. Jack was brilliant but strange. Most of his ideas were too bizarre to be useful, but occasionally he stumbled onto something valuable. "Show me," she said. Jack grinned and picked up a small speaker. He placed it near the grayish organ floating in a clear liquid. "Watch the readings on that screen," he said, pointing to a monitor. He pressed a button on his phone, and a simple ringtone played, an old tune from decades ago. The readings on the screen jumped wildly. "Now watch this," Jack said, changing to a different sound, the low hum of a ship engine. The readings barely moved. "They're sensitive to certain frequencies," Susan realized. "Frequencies that don't bother us much." "Not just sensitive," Jack said. "Look at the cellular breakdown. These sounds actually hurt them. Like a lot." He picked up a tablet and showed her more data. "I tried lots of different sounds. The worst for them: old ringtones, pop music, and commercial jingles. Stuff most humans find annoying but not painful." Susan frowned. "You're suggesting we what? Play music at an advanced alien species that's currently destroying our colonies?" "Well, when you say it like that, it sounds silly," Jack admitted. "But think about it. Their ships, weapons, even their communication systems must be designed around their biology. If we broadcast these frequencies during battle..." "You think we could disrupt their systems," Susan finished. "It's completely crazy, I know," Jack said quickly. "But we've tried missiles, we've tried lasers, we've tried everything normal. Maybe it's time for something stupid." Susan thought for a moment it was ridiculous, but they were out of options. "Keep working on this. I want more data and I want a delivery system. How do we broadcast these sounds in space?" "Already thinking about that," Jack said, pulling up schematics. "We can modify our communication arrays to blast these frequencies across all channels. If their ships receive any communications at all, they'll get a face full of Baby Shark and Nokia ringtones." For the next 2 days, Jack and a small team worked around the clock. They tested different sounds on the alien tissue samples, cataloging which caused the most disruption. They modified communication equipment to broadcast at maximum power across all frequencies. When Susan presented the idea to Admiral Wilson and the War Council, the room fell silent. "Let me get this straight," Admiral Wilson said slowly. "Your plan to defeat an alien armada that has destroyed half our colonies is to play annoying music at them?" General Pam Rivera laughed. "This has to be the dumbest weapon ever proposed in human history." "With respect, sir, ma'am," Susan said firmly, "every conventional weapon has failed. The Zalaxians will reach Earth in less than 48 hours. We can try this alongside our regular defenses. If it fails, we're no worse off." Admiral Wilson looked around the table at the other officers. No one offered any better ideas. "Fine," he said finally. "Outfit 10 ships with this sound weapon, but the rest of the fleet sticks to the original battle plan." As Susan left the war room, Jack was waiting outside, bouncing on his toes. "Where a go?" he asked hopefully. 10 ships, Susan said. "That's all the Admiral would approve." Jack's face fell slightly. "Not much." "It's enough to test your theory," Susan said. "Now we need to get it working. The fate of humanity might depend on your playlist, Peterson." Jack grinned, the excitement returning to his eyes. "Don't worry, Commander. I've been preparing for this moment my whole life. I have the most annoying sounds in human history ready to go." As they walked toward the lab, Susan felt a strange mix of hope and doubt. Using ringtones to fight an advanced alien species was probably the most ridiculous plan in military history. But as the Zalaxian fleet drew closer to Earth and humanity's chances grew dimmer, she found herself thinking that sometimes the dumbest ideas were crazy enough to work. Tatoang. Least she hoped so. The alternative was extinction. The next morning, Susan walked into the lab to find Jack surrounded by speakers of all sizes. He hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his hair messier than usual, and he had 3 empty coffee cups on his desk. "I made the ultimate playlist," Jack said without looking up from his computer. "I call it Songs to Destroy Aliens By. It has everything from old phone ringtones to the most annoying commercial jingles from the last 100 years. Susan picked up a tablet with the playlist. "You included It's a Small World?" 5 different versions, Jack said proudly. "That song has made humans want to rip their ears off since the 2000s. Imagine what it will do to Zalaxian hearing." Susan wasn't convinced this would work, but she helped Jack anyway. They had spent the past 24 hours loading their sound weapon onto 10 ships. Each vessel had been fitted with extra communication arrays, powerful amplifiers, and speakers designed to project sound waves even in the vacuum of space by transforming them into specific radiation waves that could penetrate Zalaxian shields. "The ships are ready," Susan said. "Admiral Wilson wants a final briefing in an hour." Jack looked up, suddenly nervous. "He still thinks this is stupid, doesn't he?" "Everyone does," Susan admitted, "including me sometimes. But stupid is all we have left." An hour later, they stood in the war room before Admiral Wilson and the other commanders. Jack fidgeted beside Susan as she explained their plan one last time. "The modified ships will position themselves here," Susan pointed to a holographic map showing Earth and the approaching alien fleet. "When the Zalaxians come within range, they'll broadcast Jack's playlist across all frequencies." General Rivera rolled her eyes. "And then what? The aliens surrender because our music is so bad?" "If it works," Susan continued, ignoring the comment, "their ships should experience communication disruptions first. Their crews may become disoriented, possibly even experiencing physical pain. This might give our main fleet an opening to attack." Admiral Wilson looked tired but determined. "The Zalaxian fleet will arrive in 18 hours. Humanity's survival depends on this battle." He looked at Jack and Susan. "I hope your crazy idea works, because if it doesn't, none of us will be alive to court-martial you." As the meeting ended, Lieutenant Davis approached Susan with a tablet. "Commander, we've received a transmission from the moon colony. The governor wants to speak with you." On the screen appeared Governor Alan Russell, his face grim. "Commander Miller, my sources tell me Earth Defense is planning to use untested sound-based weapons in the coming battle. Is this true? Susan hesitated. Governor, all strategies for Earth's defense are classified. My colony has 20,000 civilians, the governor said firmly. We deserve to know if our lives depend on some engineer's music playlist. Jack stepped into view. Sir, I'm that engineer. And yes, it sounds crazy, but we've tested these frequencies on Zalaxian tissue samples. They work. The governor stared at them for a long moment. God help us all, he said before ending the transmission. As they walked to the hangar bay, Jack looked at Susan. That didn't go well. It doesn't matter, Susan said. All that matters is whether this works. They reached the hangar where the 10 modified ships waited. Crews loaded final supplies and ran last system checks. Susan would command the lead ship with Jack alongside to monitor the sound weapon's effects. Captain Steve Daniels, one of the pilots assigned to the mission, approached them. Commander, the teams have a question. If this works, and the aliens are hurt by our music, what's to stop them from just turning off their communication systems? Jack jumped in before Susan could answer. We're not just broadcasting on standard channels. We're hitting every frequency their ships can possibly receive, including their sensor arrays and navigation systems. They can't shut it all down without flying blind. Captain Daniels didn't look convinced, but he nodded and walked back to his ship. Is that true? Susan asked quietly. Jack shrugged. Mostly, I hope. 6 hours later, the 10 ships launched from Earth's orbit. Susan sat in the command chair of the lead vessel, the UES Defender. Jack was at a station nearby, surrounded by screens monitoring the sound weapon systems. All ships report ready, Commander, said the communications officer. Good, Susan said. Take up defensive formation beta and prepare all conventional weapons. The sound system is our primary strategy, but we still fight with everything we've got. On the main screen, long-range sensors showed the Zalaxian fleet. Over 50 ships, including their massive dreadnought, were approaching Earth at high speed. They'll be in range in 20 minutes, reported the sensor officer. Susan turned to Jack. Is the sound weapon ready? Jack nodded, his earlier jokes and energy replaced by focused determination. Ready. I've set up 3 different playlists to rotate randomly. If they start to adapt to one set of sounds, we'll hit them with something new. The minutes ticked by slowly. Susan watched the alien fleet grow larger on the screen. Earth's main defense fleet was positioning itself behind them, ready to attack if the sound weapon created an opening. 5 minutes to weapon range, the tactical officer announced. Susan took a deep breath. All ships prepare to broadcast on my mark. Commander, Jack said suddenly, what if this doesn't just hurt them? What if it kills them? Susan looked at him, surprised by the question. They're trying to destroy our planet, Jack. I know, he said. It's just, I made this playlist to be annoying, not lethal. I never thought I'd be using old ringtones as a mass destruction weapon. If it works, Susan reminded him, it will save billions of human lives. Jack nodded, his face serious. Right. Ready when you are. The Zalaxian ships entered range. Their weapons were powering up, preparing to fire on Earth just as they had done to the other human colonies. All ships broadcast now, Susan ordered. Jack pressed the button on his console. Across all 10 human ships, powerful transmitters began, broadcasting the carefully selected sounds across every frequency. For several long seconds, nothing happened. No effect, the tactical officer reported. Admiral Wilson's voice came through the comm. Miller, if this doesn't work in the next 30 seconds, fall back and... He was interrupted by the sensor officer's excited shout. Commander, look at the alien ships. On the screen, the Zalaxian vessels had stopped their advance. Several smaller ships were drifting, their formation breaking apart. It's working, Jack whispered, staring at his readings. Their communication systems are going haywire. Susan leaned forward in her chair, hardly daring to believe it. Increase broadcast power. All ships target the dreadnought. The dumbest weapon in human history was about to face its ultimate test. The Zalaxian ships drifted in space, their perfect formation broken. On the bridge of the UES Defender, Susan watched with growing hope as the alien vessels moved erratically. Some were spinning slowly. Others were firing weapons at empty space. The massive dreadnought at the center of their fleet had stopped moving completely. "Status report," Susan ordered. "The smaller Zalaxian ships are showing signs of system failure," the tactical officer replied. "Their weapons are firing randomly. 3 ships have collided with each other." Jack stared at his readings with wide eyes. "I can't believe this is working," he said softly. Then louder. "The playlist just switched to Baby Shark. Their communication systems are going crazy." Admiral Wilson's voice came through the comm. "Miller, what's happening out there?" "It's working, sir," Susan replied, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "The sound weapon is disrupting their ships. Request permission to advance and target their weapon systems." There was a brief pause before the Admiral responded. "Permission granted. All ships, advance and fire on the Zalaxian vessels. Focus on weapons and engines." The 10 human ships moved forward, firing lasers and missiles at the disoriented alien fleet. For the first time since the war began, the Zalaxian shields couldn't stop the human attacks. Explosions flashed across several alien ships as Earth's weapons found their targets. "We're actually hurting them," Jack said in amazement. "The most advanced species we've ever met, and we're beating them with annoying songs." Susan allowed herself a small smile. "Keep broadcasting. I want that dreadnought disabled." The human ships pressed their attack, focusing fire on the Zalaxian dreadnought. Its massive hull was scarred with blast marks, but it was still largely intact. Suddenly, the sensor officer shouted a warning. "Commander, the dreadnought is launching smaller craft. Dozens of them." Susan's smile vanished. "They're sending boarding parties," she realized. "They want to stop the broadcasts at the Yabi source." On the screen, small Zalaxian fighters streaked toward the human ships. They were fast and maneuverable, harder to track than the larger vessels. "All ships deploy defensive measures," Susan ordered. "Prepare for possible boarding attempts." The UES Defender shook as a Zalaxian fighter strafed its hull with energy. "Weapons." Alarms blared throughout the ship. "Hull breach on Deck 5, the damage control officer reported. "Emergency bulkheads holding." Susan turned to Jack. "Keep that sound weapon broadcasting no matter what. I'm heading to Deck 5 with a security team." She pointed at Lieutenant Frank Davis. "Frank, you have the bridge." Jack stood up quickly. "I'm coming with you. If they damage the broadcasting equipment, I might be the only one who can fix it." Susan wanted to argue, but there was no time. "Fine. Stay behind me." They raced through the ship's corridors, joining a security team of 6 soldiers heading to the breach point. They could hear the sounds of energy weapons firing ahead. "The Zalaxians broke through the emergency bulkhead," one of the security officers reported. "They're inside the ship." Susan drew her sidearm. "How many?" "Sensors show 5 aliens." They rounded a corner and saw them. Zalaxians were tall, with gray skin and large, bulbous heads. They wore sleek armor and carried advanced energy weapons. But something was wrong with them. They moved slowly, their large heads tilted at odd angles. Some were pressing their 3-fingered hands against the sides of their heads. "The music," Jack whispered. "They're being affected by it even more now that they're inside the ship." Susan nodded. "All units, engage the intruders. Use the ship's internal speakers to increase sound levels in their vicinity." The security team opened fire. The disoriented Zalaxians tried to return fire, but their shots went wide. 2 aliens fell quickly. A third fired wildly, hitting the ceiling and sending sparks raining down. The last 2 retreated back toward their entry point. "They're falling." "Back," Susan said. "We need to seal that breach." As they moved forward cautiously, one of the retreating Zalaxians suddenly turned. Instead of firing its weapon, it made a strange gesture with its hands. "Hold fire," Susan ordered, raising her own hand. "I think it's trying to communicate." The alien made the gesture again, then pointed to its head, then to the speakers in the ceiling that were blasting "It's a Small World" at full volume. Jack stepped forward despite Susan's attempt to hold him back. "It's saying the music hurts," he said. "I think." The Zalaxian made another gesture. then reached slowly to its belt and removed what looked like a small device. It placed the device on the floor and slid it toward the humans. "What is that?" Susan asked, weapon still raised. Jack knelt down and examined it without touching it. "It looks like some kind of translator." The Zelaxian pressed something on its armor. A holographic display appeared above the device on the floor. Strange symbols flashed, then transformed into English words. "Stop noise weapon. Talk." Susan looked at Jack, then back at the alien. "Is this a trick?" Jack shrugged. "Only one way to find out." He reached down and picked up the translator. "Computer, reduce volume in this section by 50%, he said. The ship's computer acknowledged, and the blaring music became quieter. The Zelaxian visibly relaxed, though it still seemed uncomfortable. Jack typed something into the translator. The device projected his message. "Why attack humans?" The alien responded immediately. "Misunderstanding. Thought Earth signals were attack." "What signals?" Susan asked, and Jack typed her question. "Music broadcasts. Painful to us. Thought deliberate." Attack. Jack and Susan exchanged shocked looks. "Are they saying this whole war started because they picked up our radio and TV broadcasts?" Jack asked in disbelief. "Our entertainment was hurting them, so they thought we were attacking," Susan said slowly. "And now we're actually using it as a weapon." The Zelaxian sent another message. "Stop weapon. Discuss peace." Susan hesitated. This could be a trick, a way to get them to lower their defenses. But if there was even a small chance to end the war, without more death. "Keep the sound weapon active but reduce the volume throughout the fleet," she ordered, "and tell Admiral Wilson we may have just made first real contact with the Zelaxians." As Jack relayed the orders, the alien made another gesture, touching its chest with 3 fingers. Through the translator came the words, "Grateful, not all want war." Susan nodded slowly and lowered her weapon. "The dumbest weapon in human history," she said quietly. "Might just have given us a chance for peace." Word of the encounter spread quickly through the human fleet. Admiral Wilson ordered a temporary ceasefire but kept the sound weapons active at a lower volume. On board the UES Defender, Susan and Jack escorted their Zelaxian visitor to a secure conference room. The alien seemed less distressed now that the music was playing at a lower volume, but it still moved with obvious discomfort. Through the translator, they learned its name was Zell, a high-ranking officer from the Dreadnought. "I still don't trust this," Admiral Wilson said over the video link from his command ship. His face filled the large screen on the wall. "This could be a trick to get us to lower our defenses." Susan nodded. "Understood, sir, but I believe this is genuine. The Zelaxians could have destroyed us already if their ships weren't affected by our sound weapon." Zell typed into the translator and the device projected the message, "Not trick. Many Zelaxian die. Want end fighting." Jack leaned forward, fascinated by the alien. "Ask it why they attacked us in the first place. If our broadcasts were hurting them, why not try to communicate before attacking?" When Susan relayed the question, Zell's response was quick. "Tried. Sent messages. No reply." "We never received any messages," Susan said. Zell made a strange gesture with its hands. The translator interpreted, "Different communication. Not understand." Each other. Admiral Wilson frowned. "This is getting us nowhere. Ask it what they want now." Susan did, and Zell's answer appeared, "Stop noise weapon. Talk with leader." "Their Supreme Commander wants to meet with you, Admiral," Susan translated. Admiral Wilson looked skeptical but nodded slowly. "Very well. We'll arrange a meeting on neutral ground. The moon colony has facilities that can accommodate both species, but the sound weapons stay active until we have a formal agreement." As they prepared for the meeting, more reports came in from the fleet. The Zelaxian ships had stopped fighting, but remained in defensive positions. The Dreadnought had sent a message to all its vessels ordering them to stand down. Jack was working frantically to modify the translator for the upcoming meeting. "This device is amazing," he told Susan. "Their technology is so advanced, yet they never figured out a way to block our simple sound waves." "Different biology, different priorities," Susan replied. They probably never imagined sound could be a weapon because it doesn't hurt them the same way energy weapons or explosives do. A message came through from Admiral Wilson. The meeting was set for 3 hours later at the Moon Colony's diplomatic center. Susan and Jack would accompany him as part of the human delegation. As they prepared to leave, Jack seemed nervous. What? If we mess this up? What if this really is a trap? Susan checked her sidearm. Then we still have our dumb weapon, and we've proven it works. The journey to the Moon Colony was tense. Their small shuttle was escorted by fighters, while the sound weapon continued broadcasting at low levels from the fleet. Zell traveled separately in a Zelaxian transport. The Moon Colony's diplomatic center was a large dome-shaped building in the center of the colony. Half of it had been adjusted for the Zelaxians, with different air mixture and lower sound levels. The human delegation arrived first and waited in a large conference room with a round table. Admiral Wilson paced nervously. Remember, we maintain a position of strength. We don't apologize for defending ourselves. The doors opened, and the Zelaxian delegation entered. There were 5 of them, including Zell. At their center was a taller Zelaxian with elaborate markings on its gray skin. The translator identified it as Mox, the supreme commander of the Zelaxian fleet. Everyone sat down, humans on one side, Zelaxians on the other. The translators were placed in the center of the table. Admiral Wilson spoke first. We came in peace. You attacked us. Now you ask for peace. Why should we trust you? Mox's response appeared on the translator. Misunderstanding. Your broadcasts cause pain. Thought Attack responded to protect our people. If you were hurt by our broadcasts, why not simply stay away from our solar system? Susan asked. Broadcasts spread. Reach our worlds. Getting stronger. More painful. Jack broke in. Our radio and television signals. They've been going into space for over 100 years, getting stronger as our technology improved. Mox confirmed. Yes. Last 10 cycles. Much worse. Some frequencies cause death to young ones. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. From the Zelaxian perspective, Earth had been unintentionally broadcasting deadly weapons into space for years, harming their children. And when you came to investigate, you interpreted our attempts at communication as more attacks, Susan said, slowly. Yes, then human ships fire weapons, war start. Because you fired first, Admiral Wilson said angrily. You destroyed our colonies. Mistake. Regret. Mox's translator displayed. Then, want peace now. Jack had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke up. We can modify our broadcasts, find frequencies that don't hurt your people, and maybe you can help us develop technology to filter harmful sounds for your species. Mox and the other Zelaxians conferred among themselves, making strange gestures and sounds. Finally, Mox responded, possible. Need study human sounds. Find safe ones. And we need guarantees you won't attack us again, Admiral Wilson insisted. Agree. Exchange knowledge. Learn together. As the discussion continued, Susan noticed something odd. One of the younger Zelaxians kept tilting its head, as if listening to something. It didn't seem to be in pain like the others when they first heard the music. Instead, it seemed interested. Susan nudged Jack and nodded toward the young alien. Jack watched it for a moment, then typed something into his tablet. Soft music began playing from his device. Not annoying ringtones or jingles, but a gentle classical piece. The young Zelaxian jerked in surprise, then leaned forward. The others winced, but this one seemed fascinated. It made a gesture, and its translator displayed, beautiful pain. Again. Jack increased the volume slightly. The young alien swayed to the music while the older ones looked uncomfortable. I think, Jack said slowly, some of them actually like our music, or at least they find the sensation interesting even if it hurts a little. Mox's translator flashed, younger ones. Different. Seek new sensations. Susan smiled. Like human teenagers listening to music their parents hate. As the meeting continued into the night, a strange new idea began to form. Perhaps the very thing that had started this war, human music and sounds, could become the foundation for peace between their species. The dumbest weapon had become the smartest bridge. 1 month after the meeting on the moon colony, Susan stood in a newly built chamber on Earth's International Space Station. The room had been designed specifically for human-Zalaxian interactions, with special sound-dampening panels and adjustable acoustic properties. Today was the first official cultural exchange between the two species. Jack paced nervously around the room, checking and rechecking his equipment. He had spent weeks working with both human and Zalaxian scientists to develop a system that would allow them to share sounds safely. "Stop worrying," Susan told him. "They have accepted your proposal. That's already more than anyone expected." Jack nodded but continued adjusting dials on his control panel. "This is different from battle. This is diplomacy." After the peace treaty was signed, Jack had been appointed as Earth's first sound ambassador to the Zalaxians. His job was to catalog human sounds and music that were safe for alien ears, while also studying which ones might be interesting or even pleasant for the younger generation of Zalaxians, who seemed drawn to the strange sensations human music caused them. The door opened, and 3 Zalaxians entered, including Zell and the young one from the peace talks, now identified as Kira. They wore special protective headgear that would filter harmful frequencies while allowing safe ones through. Susan stepped forward to greet them. Over the past month, she had learned some basic Zalaxian hand gestures, which she used now along with the translator. "Welcome to the Human Zalaxian Cultural Center." Zell returned the gesture. The translator displayed, "Honored, important day for both species." Jack stepped forward nervously. "I've prepared a selection of sounds and music that our scientists believe will be safe for you. We'll start with the mildest ones and monitor your reactions carefully." Kira made an eager gesture that translated as, "Begin, want experience." Katrin, older Zalaxian Zell, seemed more cautious but nodded agreement. Jack activated his equipment. Soft sounds filled the room, gentle ocean waves, light wind through leaves, and the quiet bubbling of a stream. These were natural sounds that human scientists had determined were the least likely to cause discomfort to Zalaxian hearing. Zell and the other adult Zalaxian listened carefully, their large heads tilted. After a moment, they signaled that these sounds were acceptable. Kira, however, seemed almost disappointed. "Now for some very simple human music," Jack said, adjusting the controls. The room filled with a basic melody played on a single flute. It was one of the simplest forms of human music with no complex harmonies or rhythm changes. The reaction was immediate. Zell winced slightly but did not seem to be in pain. Kira, however, moved closer to the speakers, fascinated. "More," the young Zalaxian's translator displayed. Over the next hour, Jack carefully introduced more complex sounds, a simple piano piece, then a string quartet, and finally a gentle vocal performance. With each new sound, he monitored the Zalaxians' reactions, adjusting frequencies and volumes to find the perfect balance between interesting and painful. "It's working," Susan whispered to him as they watched Kira sway to the music. Jack nodded, his earlier nervousness replaced with excitement. "They're not just tolerating it, Kira actually likes it." Zell approached them during a break. "Painful still, but interesting pain, different from weapon." "That's because we're removing the specific frequencies that cause the most harm," Jack explained, "and we're playing it at a much lower volume." Kira joined them, the translator showing enthusiasm. Learn more." "Take back to young Zalaxians," Susan exchanged glances with Jack. This was beyond what they had hoped for, not just tolerance but actual interest. "We'd like to learn about your sounds too," Susan said. "Do Zalaxians have music?" The question seemed to confuse them. After some discussion among themselves, Zell explained, "Not like humans. Communicate with electromagnetic pulses. Sound secondary." This gave Jack an idea. Could you show us your electromagnetic communication? Maybe we could experience it like you experience our music. The Zelaxians conferred again. Finally, Zell agreed. They produced a small device that generated patterns of light and magnetic fields. When activated, Susan and Jack felt nothing at first, then a strange tingling sensation across their skin. It feels like pins and needles, but pleasant somehow, Susan said, surprised. Jack nodded. It's making my hair stand up, but in a good way. As the exchange continued, Admiral Wilson and other high-ranking officials arrived to observe. The Admiral pulled Susan aside while Jack continued working with the Zelaxians. When you first told me about Peterson's sound weapon, I thought it was the dumbest idea I'd ever heard, the Admiral admitted. Now it's the foundation of our peace treaty. Susan smiled. Sometimes the dumbest ideas work because no one sees them coming, not even us. 6 months later, the first joint human-Zelaxian space station was completed. It orbited between Earth and Mars, dedicated to cultural and scientific exchange. Jack's sound library had grown to include hundreds of human sounds and music pieces safe for Zelaxian ears, categorized by intensity and effect. Most surprising was the growth of what the young Zelaxians called pain-pleasure music, human compositions, that caused mild discomfort but fascinating sensations for them. It had become something of a rebellion among Zelaxian youth, much to the dismay of their elders. Susan watched from the observation deck as Jack worked with a group of young Zelaxians, teaching them about human musical instruments. Despite the protective gear they wore, they still flinched occasionally at certain notes, but they kept playing. Who would have thought, said Governor Russell, who had joined the program as a diplomatic liaison, that the thing that almost destroyed us would bring us together? Susan nodded. The universe has a strange sense of humor. On a small stage, a human violinist played alongside a Zelaxian using one of their electromagnetic instruments. The combined effect was unlike anything either species had created alone. Beautiful to human ears, excitingly painful to Zelaxians, but meaningful to both. The dumbest weapon in human history had transformed into the smartest bridge between worlds, proving that sometimes the most unlikely solutions were exactly what the universe needed. As Jack liked to say at the now regular cultural exchanges, in space, no one can hear you scream, unless you're a Zelaxian listening to Baby Shark. The joke never failed to confuse the Zelaxian elders and delight their young ones, who had embraced human humor along with human music. Peace had come from the most unexpected place, the space between sound and silence, pain and pleasure, war and understanding. And it had all started with a playlist of the most annoying sounds humans had ever created.